where's, I can't remember, where does it pull mentor pick and teacher pick? It will pull it when it's created?
Section.
Pardon?
No, it gets it off the section information.
Okay, the mentor pick will be pulled if it's on a section.
Yes.
Okay. Because I should actually be up on here so I could see what the heck's going on. Then I would think this would be okay for...
I mean, do you want it, if there is any situation, and I don't know that anyone would ever do this, but if it was a course history record created by the system, so it has links to the section and all that, but then you come in here and put in a mentor pick, do you want that to override what's in the section?
I need clarification. Would that mentor pick that you're proposing override be hand entered, or would it come through course history?
Well, I think that's what Kathy's trying to ask, is she wants to know if it comes through course history automatically because it was built by the section. If you enter a mentor pick, do you want that mentor pick field to override what is building as the mentor pick? Or would it go into addition to it? Because can we put up the 3 mentor picks?
Is that a multiple reporting field? Just a minute, I'm going to look right now.
That's what I'm wondering. Is it multiple just like the regular pick? Can you build up to 3 in there? If that's the case, just add on, I guess.
Mentor pick. Multi-valued is true. So, yes, you can put in additional ones. So, never mind.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you put in another one, it's going to be in addition to.
Okay.
Does it say how many? Somewhere it says up to 3. I don't remember if that's the teacher or the mentor.
I know the teacher is. Let me find this mentor.
Can you show us the section where that mentor information goes?
Free.
You mean in the section?
Yes.
Yes.
I had a problem with this part last year that none of my mentor picks, it didn't pull it and put it in that spot. So I must be missing something.
I think you had to add them as additional staff, and then there was something...
right here.
Oh, the responsibility. Either right there, if that teacher, if the main teacher was the mentor, then you put it there. If you have additional staff, if you have a regular teacher and then the mentor was additional staff, there was a field on that screen to say that it's a mentor teacher.
Okay.
And I think it also is the responsibility field there as well.
If we have a district course as an online class, does it pull that for reporting purposes?
Well,
or does it have to be in the section?
It has to be in the section.
The mentor part, yes, but the virtual method part, does that come from the district course
Just a minute,
setup?
because that changed last year, and I don't remember now. Hold on.
That can be on either.
Course.
That still followed what it followed before. So the virtual method can be on the district course. If it's on the district course, that pushes down to every section tied to that course.
Okay, and then the responsibility has to be on the section.
Exactly.
Well, the yes, on the section, you're right. So again, if the screen that we're looking at right now, if it's on that screen, that's the main teacher will be reported as the mentor.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
But if you have a teacher and somebody else who's the mentor, you need to put it under additional staff and put the information there.
Okay. And thank you.
So, Kathy, something we ran into is I was working with, we have Dr. Treader who does a bunch of data analysis for our county, and he was working on TSDL, like, broad range over the course of 3 years or something ridiculous for every district. And so he was trying to compare course IDs, and what he was running into is it would cut off because that field only allows for 20 characters.
Yes. That's true. Another district had that issue too.
Did they? And I don't know what to do about it because it's the way it builds. Did you guys? I know we didn't talk about this. I think I was going to bring it up, but I didn't know if we had anything we could do about it.
Shorter course names, shorter section names. I mean, that's all that the file will allow is 20. So you have to work within those parameters.
We were trying to figure out something with the leading. When you build yours, it was the ones that it builds automatically, because it's the leading zeros on the pick. And I don't know, tell me if I'm just being ridiculous, but could you tell it when it builds it if there's leading zeros on the pick to not build the leading zeros?
I could. Mm-hmm.
That would help, because I think that's what's really causing a lot of the issue is these districts went in and put leading zeros on the pick. And the problem we have now is we've used those pick numbers in other extracts to import into other applications like Star and Illuminate and things like that.
Yeah.
So now we're stuck with the leading zeros. If we take them out, it messes up other applications.
If they would have just left them alone.
I know.
Years ago, instead of the stupid leading zeros. Anyway, I can look into that. That was, let's see. And that's the section name, wasn't it?
Was it the section, course section? Oh, no, what one was it?
Wait a minute.
No, it was the...
Well, here, I got it up. I can just go look. Hold on.
Section ID?
Course section ID. Yep, that's the one. It's 20 characters.
Okay.
Uniquely identifies a particular class. Oh, okay. So then when we didn't have a section, we had to make one up.
Right. And it's the leading zeros and the pick number that pulls into that, and that's what's given us such a headache, are those leading zeros. Those leading zeros.
Just a minute, I'm writing a note. Okay, hopefully I'll know what my note means when I actually try to do this. Okay, anything else on TSDL that we need to talk about? By the end of the school year, I will definitely have the option to remove the what do you call those? Completion statuses so that they can be re-updated if necessary. I know that's been on the list for a while.
Okay.
Perfect. Just remember, it's going to take a really long time to run it, to put them all back on there. So,
right,
you do decide to do that. So make sure that your process server is going to run long enough. Anything else on any kind of state reporting?
Kathy, this is Karen. We were going to try and talk about possibly the 25E, the comment field.
Oh, that's right. Yep, that's right. When we first started Section 25, somebody had asked that we put a comment field on the screen just so the user can give themselves some notes or whatever. And that field does not go to the report. And Karen is asking if we can make it go to the reports.
And I guess
she was putting comments into her auditor, and they're not printing, so then she has to handwrite them on there. So
right.
Go
and
ahead.
it would be certain cases like if the student is not going to necessarily be submitted as a Section 25 because they came in from out of state, but now the auditors are wanting to see those out of state. So I've included them.
What do you mean they want to see them? Where do they want to see them at?
They want to know about them. So, and this came through the MPAAA too. That was the newest thing at MPAAA was that, now there were so many ins and outs out of state that now they wanted to start looking at the out of state ones and see how that factors in. So I've been including them on my 3 per page Section 25 report. I don't include them when I submit an SRM to the state, but she wants to know about them. So I don't do the exclude from Section 25, but I've been putting the note in the comment area, no fall FTE move in from out of state, something along those lines. And I put it in there, and I mean, I guess I just didn't remember. I've only done 2 of them this year now, so I didn't remember that those comments wouldn't print out. But it would be helpful because then I don't have to rewrite it back in once I print the report.
I agree. That little comment section would be helpful to have it report out.
Probably what I would do is have 2 separate comment fields then, one for, just for your own comments to yourself, and then another one for auditors.
That would be nice.
That way that, if people were putting stuff in there that didn't need to go to the auditor, it won't.
That's very possible. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Like, this kid has come back 5 times now.
Mm-hmm. I hate this stupid process. Yeah.
Yeah, those comments.
Yeah, okay, no, that would be great. I mean, if we have one that can print out and one that we can keep to ourselves, that'd be wonderful.
Yes,
okay, let me see the size on those because they're not very big fields, I don't think.
Not big at all, right.
And so do we need a couple of them, or you're just going to have to keep it short and sweet?
I'm okay with keeping it short and sweet.
Anybody else? Comments, questions?
Short and sweet sounds good to me.
Yeah. I like short and sweet.
Yes, that'll keep it simple.
No, make it really long and complicated, please.
Rather write a book.
Thanks, Carol.
Okay, well, we'll go with. I was trying to find one of the fields just to see what size it is. I'm not finding it quickly, so we'll go with 1 for now, and I guess maybe I'll just do 2. I don't know. We'll see how I feel when I do it. How about that?
Wow. When are you going to do it? We'll make sure to send you lots of candy. Let us know when you're going to do it. We'll send you lots of candy when you're going to do that so that you'll do 2.
Ooh, I like those, what are those little truffle things? I can be bribed.
Oh, yeah.
Dark chocolate? Is that what you're saying?
She likes truffles.
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 Yeah, what were those ones you guys sent me, Laura? Those are really good.
Yeah, those foil wrapped ones. She likes the
Fruchelle or something? Fruchelle?
Yeah, something.
No, not those.
Yeah.
No, they're
No, you deserve better than that.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Never mind. We don't need to talk about
which ones you're talking about.
Anyway, okay,
Whatever
so
it
I'll add
takes,
1 or 2 comment fields that will print on the reports. Is there a place to print comments on the reports, or do I need to find where to put them?
No, I think there is a place, isn't there?
Yep, there's a place for it, and it's just the box that I end up having to handwrite my things in. So, yeah, it's already there.
Okay, I might have to get with you just to be sure. Oh, they're 50 long. I was thinking they were only like 20 or something.
Yep.
So 50's not too bad, but okay.
Could I ask a question about 25, please?
Yep.
Is it a requirement to record all of this in Synergy if you are manually making your changes in MSDS? Does it still need to be on the Synergy side as well?
Doesn't have to be.
Okay.
But I'm thinking if they're coming in and out, don't you have to be changing MSDS enrollment date and that sort of thing? And if you do run it in Synergy, you get all the auditor reports and everything that your auditor is going to want.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Where are those reports at?
Pardon me?
The reports?
They come out when you run a Section 25 SRM. It'll print either one, well, it actually prints 2 reports. One is 1 per page, 1 student per page.
Uh-huh.
There's another one that's 3 students per page, because there were 2 different ones that
That's
auditors
the only one
wanted.
you can't get it.
What was that?
You can't get it any other way
Nope.
after the fact? Okay.
Nope.
You can go to history, can't you?
Oh, you mean, but you have to run it to get the reports. Right. Well, I did an SRM, and it pulled somebody as a 25, but I never got the report showing when it did it. So I didn't know how to find that. But history, okay, okay.
Who's
Job
speaking?
queue. This is Deb. Flood.
From what district?
Yeah, White Pigeon.
If you need some help with Section 25, I know it's a little complicated at first, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you want, we can walk through it, and I can give you some tips and tricks maybe.
Because when I ran the SRM, I wasn't doing 25. I was doing it for something else, and it picked up one kid as that. So, okay.
I guess I'm not following, because if you don't select the Section 25 record selection, you're not going to get the Section 25 report. And you won't get that component either, I don't think. I was going to double check that before the call.
What a wonderful segue to my question, Kathy.
Okay.
This is Carl. So every once in a while, our local juvenile justice facility will take students from us and do a Section 25, and they don't necessarily get a withdrawal record in Synergy because they may only be gone for a day. So I need to go through that summary report from CEPI and figure out who they took and see if I have to get them back. So I need to run Section 25 just based on students, so just a select bunch of students. And yesterday when I did it, I just did a regular SRM, and I had to add the Section 25 component on the CEPI site. Is it possible that you could include the Section 25 component if we check it when we do a selected student's record selection?
I think I would prefer not to at this point, unless it becomes a really big problem. What I would suggest to you, since you know which students you have to do, go into their student record, go to the enrollment tab. Laura, can you do this?
Oh, sorry.
Or whoever's controlling.
That's me.
Go to the student view.
Just go ahead and say, hey, pull it together.
Go to their enrollment tab and slide down to where the state reporting stuff is and remove the SRM date and the first day of attendance. Now, I don't know if you're going to have to change their MSDS enrollment date. I'm guessing probably.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And then they will be included again. The reason they won't be included on another Section 25 SRM is because they already have an SRM date. And now you're trying to run it for a different as of date. So if you remove that SRM date and the first day in attendance, then it'll run it again just like this is the first time you ran it for that student.
Well, but that means I have to withdraw them from the school and re-enroll them.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Just by changing the MSDS enrollment date, they'll pick up as a 25E transfer? Is that what?
Yep.
Okay.
They will?
Yep.
Why would they do that?
That's how I did
Now, what I do see as a problem with all this back and forth, and especially in this situation, when you report them, their attendance is only going to be reported from the MSDS enrollment date forward.
Yeah.
Any discipline is only going to be reported from the MSDS date forward. But this was a state thing. You know, this is their rules, and so I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to report all this stuff.
Well, I think the main thing for Section 25E is the first day of attendance. I don't know that the discipline is a factor for this SRM or
well,
any
no,
of the
not
other
for
things.
this, but I'm just saying in your general collection when discipline is reported, if they were a really bad kid and that's why they went to the juvenile home,
okay.
It's not going to report any of that discipline prior to the MSDS enrollment date.
Right.
Because you get an error at the state if anything's dated prior to that date.
Okay, so for subsequent collections is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha.
What are the steps I need to do then? Again,
you just need to come to this enrollment tab for that student. Remove the SRM date or change the MSDS enrollment date. Remove the first day in attendance. Remove the SRM date. Make sure the exclude from Section 25 is not checked. And then when you run your Section 25 SRM, that student will be included.
And then you can go back and rechange the MSDS enrollment date back to what it was before, if you want to.
I suppose you could.
Couldn't
you?
Yeah. Because if you left it at that most current date, then, like you say, the discipline information or any other information.
Isn't that going to also be a problem at the state? Because now the state has that new enrollment date, and then you're going to go and report them again with the previous one? I don't think that's going to work either.
I don't think that matters, Kath. I don't think it matters, though, Kathy, because I think I did that. I put it back to the original one last year, and I think they all went fine.
Oh, okay. Well, then you can, put the original one in that prior one just so you know what it is.
For Carl, that could be a lot of work.
Well, we have several of the same type of things. I don't know if Christina at Lansing also, but yeah, our Lighthouse, our friends at Lighthouse.
You almost need like a separate MSDS enrollment date for those type records.
How many would you say you have, Carl, through the course of the Section 25 period?
I just did 20 yesterday that Lighthouse claimed.
From 10/8 to current day, or from when to when?
Yeah, and I have to look daily to see what they claimed, if any, and then look to see if they came back.
Right.
So what triggers the Section 25 record to get extracted then? What if they didn't have? These kids would not have had an SRM yet.
When you run an SRM for Section 25, and you select the Section 25 record selection, it goes out and looks for students with an MSDS enrollment date between the start and end date.
Okay.
That's the first thing it does.
So if it falls outside of that range, then they're not going to be picked up.
Correct.
Okay.
Then it checks to see have they already been reported based on that SRM date on this screen. If there's already a date in that SRM date, or if there's a date in that SRM date and it's not equal to the as of date that you're running right now, it will not report that student again. And that's because, if you had somebody, right after count day that came in, you don't want to report that student every time you're running this, but we also want to be able to catch the ones that are backdated. So we want you to run it from 10/8 forward, but we don't want to keep reporting the same students every time. Or, re-report students that have already been reported. So that was our way of getting around that.
Okay. I didn't realize it was driven off the enrollment date, the MSDS enrollment date. So if the MSDS enrollment date is blank or null, does it look at the regular enrollment history?
MSDS enrollment date cannot be blank or null. MSDS enrollment date should be mandatory. If you don't have it mandatory on your system, you really should change that. As
a required field?
Yes, you should make it a mandatory field in property overrides.
We run a query for our secretaries. It's kind of ugly, but it does its job, and it pulls this MSDS enrollment date. It pulls the enter date, and it pulls the enter date up here, and it pulls the class's enter date. Then that way we make sure everything matches.
I want it.
How do you get around multiple enrollment activity records?
We figured out how to get around that pretty easy, but the reason it's ugly is because it pulls every enter date in classes. So the student ends up with this huge list of dates, but at least you can just quickly go down and compare them. We just put it in a PDF landscape, and at least they can just compare it and make sure all dates match. And then I just hand that off to building secretaries and say, make these dates match. I don't know which one's right. I don't know if it's, your enter date is the first date or your MSDS enrollment date or the date they enter the classes. But either way, make it all match, and they do, and then they can run the reports. I can give you guys that query. I'll give you all my Section 25E queries.
Okay.
Now, in a situation like Kara was talking about, Laura, because I know you guys have a district that has this as well.
Right.
When they are just gone for a day or two, and then they come back, are you changing all the enrollment dates, the MSDS date, the class enter dates, everything?
We are not changing the class enter date. We're doing it the way Carl was doing it and running the selected students and just having to manually enter the Section 25E. I like his suggestion.
But then you don't get those other reports. You don't get those other reports then either.
We don't use those reports.
We do. We love them, but I mean, it's only, each district I think probably Flint and, our inner city districts, Carmen Ainsworth, they have to deal with it the most, and they just manually fill out a form for those students instead of being able to get the report.
Kathy?
What?
Can you go back to that enrollment tab? And go back down by the Section 25. Kathy, couldn't you enter like what I don't know what you call those students or what those groups are called, but couldn't you put a field that says MSDS enrollment date for that type of student that could be used, and then they would just have to put in the first day of attendance there and make sure the SRM date is wiped out or whatever? And then when you go to run the Section 25, just have an option to just run those students.
Well, here's what I was thinking. Yep, here's what I was thinking. Adding another selection that's Section 25, but for selected students, and then it ignores the SRM date. It recalculates first day in attendance, no matter what. But I'm still concerned about this MSDS enrollment date then, because if somebody else has claimed your student and now you're claiming them back, doesn't that have to change?
I don't think so, because, but I don't.
It's
but
supposed to.
But not. But she's saying. No, but she's saying at the end of the year when you're putting in your discipline and everything for the whole year.
Well, you know what? That beats problem. They're the ones who made this decision.
Yeah,
so
you can't
get
your correct attendance if you keep jostling around that MSDS enrollment date.
Right.
You
almost need like a temporary MSDS enrollment date just to pull those kids in so you can reclaim them back.
Right.
See, and I
don't see how it can be temporary, because if somebody else has claimed them on, say, 12/1, and now you're trying to get them back on 12/5, you're going to have the same student out there, and what's the correct date now? It can't be 9/8 or whatever the first day of school was this year.
Exactly. It's not retroactive.
I don't think we
had retro.
Yeah, but I don't think we had any issues getting the data at the end of the year. We didn't have any errors. I mean, I don't know how much the state uses that MSD enrollment date, because I guarantee people have put them in wrong.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately.
So I don't know that they're doing any type of checking on that.
Well, anyway, like I said, what I could do is have another selection that allows you to enter what students you want to include, and then it'll run, just for those students, and no matter what information is here on the screen we were just looking at, and then
so are you saying put another?
The problem is though you still need a
Section
date.
25. A date for what?
You still need another MSDS date to pull them in, to
put
on the record.
Selecting them by MSDS date. I'll just report whatever's there.
So, Kathy, you're saying a student selector, Section 25. So it would be like in this drop-down.
Section 25 selected students. So you select that one, and then on the bottom you go down and you put in the students you want to include. And it'll include those students no matter what.
Yeah, but what MSDS date is it going to use?
Whatever you have on the enrollment tab.
Yeah,
I know, but then you
have to. Everyone's problem.
But then you have to go back to those students and change the date back to what it was, if you want the discipline and all that to come over correctly in the end of the year.
Don't change it. I'm saying leave it where it was.
Yeah, I'd leave it.
What's the difference if you change it for Section 25 or you change it back and it's different at the end of the year? What's the difference? I mean, it's still going to be changing no matter what. It doesn't make any sense to me, but you know.
I like Kathy's suggestion. That works for me.
I'm just trying to think if we had to have that MSDS date to be different for it to pull incorrectly into the state.
Different than what? Different.
You can't have it like what
a new
it was.
one?
Yeah, I think it had to be a new one.
Because
that's what I asked
what
before.
Steffi's
How can
asking
you?
For.
That's what I had asked before. Like, if you have to change it, it seems to me, why wouldn't? I mean, how can you not change it? You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I think you have to change it for the Section 25, but then when you go to run end of the year, it doesn't. I think you can put it back to what it was in the beginning to get all of your discipline data and everything.
And to me, that doesn't make any sense. Because
it doesn't make sense to me either.
Technically, they left your district. They came back, and you know they only want to know what the information is from that time forward. So,
but these are just programs that, like, it's almost like they're dual enrolled.
Right. Or yes. Yeah.
They're not
part-time in two different.
Right.
In two different districts.
Because none of this should happen for these juvenile detention centers. They should only get them for the days, you know, get whatever funding they get for the days that they're in there. But they shouldn't make the districts have to keep getting them back.
Well, yeah, we understand that too,
but we get nowhere.
The state doesn't care.
Yeah, they don't care.
Let me talk to them.
It's the onus is on us to S25 them back to us.
Right. So here's the thing: how do you mark them absent when they're there? Just plain old absent.
Well, that's the other thing too. They're considered absent. So that,
or are they not enrolled? Technically, they're not enrolled.
We don't drop them.
That's a lot of work if you did unenroll and then re-enroll and.
Yeah, that's
all the class
I forgot
dates.
what we put in there. We get very few of them, but.
Yeah, I, in the past, have just done the little back and forth with the MSDS date and called it good enough. Yep. And I know the student history looks weird, but at least we're getting the FTE that we need to, as well as the other district that gets it. Because the continuity, I mean, we have some other categorical things that are dated, and if we don't use the correct MSDS date for the beginning of the year, we might miss a homeless student or we might miss an LEP student because of the dates that those are effective. You know what I mean?
Is this something we should be asking someone at the state? I mean, it's their rules, their thing.
We probably should. It doesn't hurt. I could email them right now.
Yeah, or email Rob. Maybe, I don't know if he would.
Rob doesn't work for the state anymore.
No, true. Okay, gotcha. Or MPAAA, I was thinking, but yeah, whichever.
He may still know, though.
You know, I'm just thinking that if somebody else took your student, even if it was only for a few days, and then he came back, I mean, otherwise it's like dual enrolled in two different districts.
And I think that's how they look at it for those type of programs. Because they're only there for a very short period of time, they're still your student.
Right. So then why wouldn't you just report them in the Section 25 SRM with the regular SRM date? MSDS date, excuse me. Why wouldn't you just report them with the regular MSDS date?
I don't think it takes it. I think I had an issue with it. I had to change the MSDS date.
So no matter what, you're going to have to go there and do something.
Yeah.
No matter what, you have to go to that screen and do something.
Right. But if you added an additional MSDS date for those students, at least the original one, you wouldn't have to go back to that record again and change it back.
So you're saying check for this override MSDS enrollment date and use that if it's there. Otherwise, use the other one.
I know, but it would only be for those students.
It would be helpful, but it would really help for those that have 20 or less or whatever.
Right. Like with Carl, he's like, he's probably going to have I don't know how many before it's over.
We had several too. I've done 2 from Lighthouse.
I mean,
already.
I had maybe like 15 last year, and that was a pain because then you had to write down the date, and you had to go put it back in after you ran.
You have the prior MSDS enrollment date field where you could just put it in there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you could
use that. I mean, it's only used in state reporting for summer withdrawals who have come back after count day. That's the only time.
But you still have to go. I know, but you still have to go back to that record and put it back in again.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So, okay, can you go back to the enrollment tab?
So when you have like 50 of those, that's a pain in the butt.
So let's
do this. So if you did add another enrollment date, could we just hide it? Because we probably won't want it.
It would just say something like MSDS enrollment date override or something like that.
Well, no, I think you got to call it whatever that program is called so people know what it's for. What is that? What is that for, Carl?
Section
what
25.
Is it called?
Juvenile justice?
Juvenile justice. Thank you. Yeah. Juvenile justice or something like that. So it's used only for that.
Well, I mean, you guys can call it whatever you want. In property
right.
Naughty student enrollment date. How's that?
Naughty student enrollment date. I don't know, Carl, maybe can you test one of your students and see if it takes the original MSD enrollment date? Maybe it doesn't matter what the MSDS enrollment date is. I thought it did last year when I tried doing it that way.
For Section 25E, yes. If you do selected, you can select the students regardless of the MSDS enrollment date.
No,
but
what
when
Debbie
you do
is saying, will the state take an MSDS enrollment date even in the prior year?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
No, it won't for Section 25.
I don't think it will.
You don't?
That's why I had to change them.
It's the first day of attendance that it's looking at for funding purposes, not the MSDS date.
Well, then we don't even
have to have the other. But the two are related somehow. I remember getting errors on enrollment date before.
Yeah, I did too, and that's why I had to go in there and manually change them last year and then put them back.
Okay, so here's what I suggest. Here's what I suggest we do. In that Section 25 section, I will add another date field that says, and I'll call it MSDS enrollment date override. You guys can call it whatever you want. I will also add the other comment field. Then when you run it, when you're on the SRM screen, there will be a separate selection that says Section 25 for selected students. Then you'll have to go down and put in whatever students you're running. And it'll include those students no matter what. I mean, it'll just include them. It won't be looking at any dates. It'll create all the reports. It'll, do whatever it needs to do. It'll change SRM date. It'll change first day in attendance. And it'll be just like you were running a regular SRM, only you're telling it which ones you want to include. And it'll use that override date if it's there. If it's not there, it'll use the MSDS enrollment date, the normal one.
Can you go to that thing for me a minute?
What thing?
Report.
For
the utility.
This one?
Yeah,
for first day in attendance, Kathy, for first day in attendance, were you planning on recalculating that or just using what was in the field?
I'm thinking I'll have to recalculate.
See, then you have to have a separate MSDS, right?
Well, I'm just saying some people might want to change the MSDS enrollment date and just use that, and always change it. I don't know. It'll have to base it on one of those dates, one of the MSDS dates. So if you don't change the original one, I guess it's going to have to use that. Otherwise, how will it know what to use?
Right.
This is Christina from Lansing. We have several requests against this for Section 25 right now, and the original enrollment date that was submitted in MSDS by other districts have years of 2012, 2013. The Section 25 went through and were approved.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So it can have old dates.
So you're saying it's looking at first day in attendance? For Section 25, the state only cares about first day in attendance.
Right.
That's what drives the funding. I know. I thought that was it.
So then I'm wondering, do you have to just put in first day of attendance, and then maybe we don't need that MSDS, override date?
As long as it takes that old MSDS date, then
just put in first day in attendance.
How does it calculate first day of attendance, though? isn't it going to get you something back in September?
No, you're going to have to manually put the first day of attendance in for those kids.
Okay.
If you're running a regular Section 25 SRM, it's looking at MSDS enrollment date and then looking at attendance and finding the first day that they attended. But in this case, and we're still working this out, this isn't set in stone, nothing's been coded yet. In this case, we're saying maybe instead of having that MSDS enrollment date override field that you'd have to populate, why not just populate the first day in attendance, and the program will just use that rather than trying to calculate it.
Okay, so how are you going to
something?
What's it going to look at to pull it for a Section 25E SRM? Because right now it's looking at the MSDS enrollment date, right?
It's only going to include the ones that you say you want to include, because we're talking about the one that's for selected students.
Okay.
So if
we're doing
you're going to put in the students, you're going to list the students, and it's going to pick up the MSDS enrollment date that's on the screen, the first day in attendance date that's on the screen. It will ignore the SRM date and update that after running this, and it'll include the students you say you want to include.
And it will give us the 25E reports?
Yes, and it'll produce the reports.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
I like it.
So are we in agreement that we don't need an override date for MSDS enrollment date? We're just going to use first day in attendance.
Yep.
Yes,
as long as we don't,
perfect.
Yep. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
You'll have that ready tomorrow?
Sure. I don't have anything to do today.
I'll give you 2 weeks when I'm in Florida.
I'll have the updates for the new PES updates, and it'll all be done. Don't worry.
Kathy's good.
No worries.
Just so you know, I'm going to Cancun at the end of the January, or not Cancun, Cozumel.
Where are you going? You
don't
know?
Hey, that's the end of January.
I know. I'm just saying. I don't care what's going on.
Section 25
I
is
won't be
almost
here.
over by then.
Okay, so just a minute, I gotta make some notes here. Yay, Barb's here. She can't get into the meeting.
She gets to do New Year rollover.
Hold on, I gotta put it on speaker so these guys can talk. Jen's here too. Hold on. Can you still hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to tie the computer.
Oh, you guys.
Is there Christmas shopping or something you guys
I'm done. Okay, we were just talking about Section 25. I think we got it all worked out. So anything else on state reporting that we want to talk about? Anybody there?
Yeah.
I think we're done.
We're all stunned.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, if no one has anything else on state reporting, then I will turn it over to Barb and Jen.
Who's controlling this?
Laura.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I had walked out of the room for a second.
That's okay. I just didn't know who was controlling the stuff.
Do you want me to turn this over to,
Hold on, just a second. Would it work to put this on hold or put it on park and you guys can take it?
actually, I wanted to
But we can't log into
re-record.
this piece.
Why not?
It won't let us. Tells us it's full. And she shut hers down and it still won't let me in.
Oh, okay.
That's the
Listen,
problem. We can't get into the...
But if we pause it and just start again, it just starts again.
I really don't care about it.
I don't know how to split it into 2 meetings.
Oh, I
or
don't.
2 sections of,
Yeah.
maybe after we're done, we can do that.
If we stop it and restart it, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. No, that's
Okay, I just don't know how to turn this meeting over to, who
Who are we gonna assign this to?
Barb's gonna do it.
Oh,
Yeah,
Barb?
but they have to do it to Kathy though.
Barb's at my desk.
Barb's here. My Grand Rapids, my engagement got switched around, so.
Okay. I think, do I hit this? Okay. So you're under Kathy's,
B.
Z?
B, Brightinger, Kathy Brightinger.
Do I see a B?
I don't think her name's listed.
Got it.
On mine.
Okay, sharing one end. Okay. All right.
Hello, this
I'm
is
passing
James
it
and
over
Barb.
to you.
Have schools. We're curious if we can get access to the meeting. It tells us there's already 25 participants joined and we can't get in.
I just tried to figure out what's going on with the number of connections. I'm getting mixed reviews right now. I've heard that our license is only for 25 connections, but I'm still trying to find out what our limit actually is.
All right, thank you. We're just on the phone.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll keep working on that, see if I can figure something out.
Okay. Do you guys see I should say, do you see Kathy's screen?
No.
Statewide Synergy User Group.
Did you grab it?
It's like we got disconnected or something?
Do we have to share? Do we have to do something to share?
You might have to hit share.
You have to share. No. I don't know. Oh, wait, we're seeing something now.
Kathy B's screen.
Yay.
That's blank.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. Debbie, I'm just going to get on yours, okay?
That's fine.
Since you were going to do it anyway.
I didn't do anything.
So we're going to talk about New Year rollover. And I was not supposed to be here, and things got changed, which is Debbie was very happy about.
I said, good, you can do it.
She didn't have to do it. So remember we talked at the last user group meeting that you guys had to do New Year rollover before we started doing the hands-on scheduling training that we're going to do in January. If you don't do it, people can come and they can sit and, watch and they can look at stuff in their current year, but they wouldn't be able to start setting anything up for the new year. So you have to get the New Year roll done before they could come and kind of do hands-on. Now, one of the things that we had talked about when we were going to do New Year rollover is that you guys could actually be on your box and you could kind of run the steps, and if you had problems, you could troubleshoot. But because we're all via the web now, that would be near impossible. So if you're kind of doing it along with us and you run into any issues, you're going to kind of have to hold on to those and maybe submit a ticket to the help desk for help, because it's kind of hard to troubleshoot via the web like this. So we'll just kind of go through and talk about the steps and kind of just give you a refresher and those types of things. I am going to just kind of keep talking. So if you're going to have a question or whatever, just kind of pipe in and interrupt me and we'll ask the question. The first thing that you have to do when you're doing your New Year rollover is in district setup, you have to make sure that you have your year extension set up. So, for example, if you go to change your focus and you look at your years, it's likely that you do not see a 16-17 school year. So even if you see it here in the list, you may not see a year extension over here. That's because you may not have a regular extension set up for that year. What I mean by that is if you look here at 16, see how you have the regular? But if we click on Debbie's 2017, notice there's nothing below it. So this regular extension is what's pushing it out here into our select year. In order to add the year extension here, you have to have the year highlighted that you wish to add the extension for, and then you're going to come up here to your action field and you're going to click Add Extension for 2017. I'm going to click on it, but I won't do it, Debbie, just so you know, I'll cancel out of it. So when you click on the year that you want to add the extension for and click Add Extension, you're going to get a screen that comes up. You're going to say what extension you're adding it for. In this case, if we're opening it up for scheduling, we're going to do like regular. And you want to make sure that you click Link Year with all organizations. That way, as it's doing that year, it is creating it in your organization setup that it's a valid year for that organization. if you don't check that checkbox, then you would have to go through each of your buildings and add the year manually in organizations. So you do want to make sure that you check link organizations, and then you would save. I'm obviously not going to do that because I'm looking at Debbie's 2017 year. But once you click save, then when you're back out here in the tree, you would see that the regular extension's here. Everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. I just got a pop-up that says you're now the host. So then we would see the extension here. Now, after you immediately add the regular extension, if you pull down the select year, you're not going to see it right away. So this is one of those things that you have to sign out and sign back. Can I just a minute, guys? Hold on. Kathy's looking at something because we've kind of consumed her desk here. Okay. Oh, and then I can screen this back down. Okay. So you won't see this here right away. So if you sign out and sign back in, then you're going to see the year here in your pull down. Okay? So that's that first step that you have to do. Now, I sometimes too will also, just because at this time of the year you're going to go into New Year rollover a lot. So on a lot of systems, I may have already done this, but if not, I will go into pad security and I will look for the program New Year rollover setup, and I'll just put a quick launch name in there of something like NYR. So that way you can quickly go up to quick launch and use the quick launch text to get to it versus having to type out New Year rollover, whatever, and first populate your list. So a lot of times we'll have the NYR set up. So here's where you're actually going to create the different steps for your New Year rollover. They're probably already set up for those of you that have done it before. So if you just go ahead and click on Find, you should see all of the steps that are set up. We've kind of through trial and error have set the steps up this way, and I'll kind of talk about why.
Hey, Barb, can I pipe in here? This
Sure,
is James from Schoolcraft. Does it matter if we're in a building and go into this, or do we need to be at the district level before we run in the New Year rollover program?
Up to this point, it didn't really matter where you're at or when you're setting up your district setup. But when you're going to run the steps in your New Year rollover, it doesn't matter which building you're at, but you need to be at a building. So you need to be focused to a building in your current year.
Thank you.
Yep. When you run the steps that are specific to a building, it will look at our schools tab, which you'll see here in a second. So it really won't matter what building you're at. It'll only run it for the schools there, but you do want to be focused at a building versus at the district level. Okay, these steps are, we typically, when we set them up, we number them so that you kind of can keep track of the order in which they get run. If you don't put a number in front of them, then they're just alphabetical, and it would be hard to remember which order they were supposed to be in. So we have it set up so that the first step that it's going to run is your calendar. That will go through and create your calendars for the buildings that you're going to have on your schools tab. And then it's going to create your school term setup. Now this is considered to be a school config file, but the reason that we set it up here versus in the school config file is we have found in years past, if you're trying to do things in your school config file that depend on school term setup, and it's trying to do those before the school term setup is completed, it will crash during that step. Now, it depends, like if you're doing, sections or things like that, and a lot of times folks aren't doing the sections in here, but if we have it set up this way, it's kind of that foolproof way, regardless of what district it is, what they're copying over, we always know it'll kind of flow through and not hit those errors. So the second one will do your school term setup, and then this will do your configuration files, which will be those different setup type pieces. Again, we break it out district and school. It is recommended to break it up that way. One, for speed, it kind of runs faster if you only do one. And then later on, if there are things that you want to rerun, you don't have to alter as much within the steps. So if there's something school specific, I can go to the schools and just run that config file, or vice versa for the district. The schools config file, one of the options in there that we can copy over is our section listing. We don't always always copy over the sections for like your secondary schools because they can bring those into the option sets during scheduling. They don't have to actually copy them over. So we've kind of, for some, started where we'll set up like a 4A, and it's copying over the config files, just the sections. So when an elementary calls and says, hey, I want my master schedule brought over, you can just run this step for whichever elementary school it was that asked for their master schedule to get copied over. Otherwise, you got to always go back to this step 4 here and change it based on what config files you're copying over, what building you're running it for. So this one here just kind of gives you a step to just copy over a master schedule for a particular elementary quickly and easily. And I'll kind of show you that. We'll look at each of these. Our step 5 is going to assign our next year grade in school. So it's going to look at each of the kids, and and I'll show you where it's kind of basing that from in there, and it'll fill out where they're supposed to go in the next year grade in school. Remember, all of these steps are run in your current school year, and up to this point, we haven't really done anything with creating our school files over in the new year. We've only taken our setup type pieces, created those in the new year, and just set in the current year their next year grade in school for our students. But at this point, there are no students over in the new year. Our step 6s are what's going to take all the information that we've kind of copied into the new year or set as our next year information in our previous steps, and it'll create an enrollment record in the new year for those kids based on which of the step 6s we're going to run. It is recommended that you not create one big step 6 and run it for your whole district. Again, number one, it's going to take quite a while to run that first time, so it's going to be a lengthy process. And number two, you might not be needing your elementary kids to be rolled over because you're not doing anything in the scheduling process with them. So you can kind of pick and choose, where you're at and what time of the year it is based on which kids that you want to create and put a record into the new year for. Again, hence the reason for the different steps. You have a step 7 here that is kind of an add drop rollover step that gets used kind of after the fact. We've kind of run all these, and now we're enrolling a new student or we're dropping a new student in the current year. When you go through the process here, you're going to have to, on new enrollees, tell the system what you want it to do, start or new year action. So where this comes into play is when you look at district setup, you have to fill in what step you want it to run when you tell it in the new year action or next year action what you want to take place. So if you say create a record for the student in the new year, you have to fill out what grade and building they're going to be at, and when you click save, it's going to come back out here, look at your district setup to see which step to use. It will use that step, and basically what it does is it creates that student in the new year, or on an inactivation gets rid of it out of the new year. So looking at our steps in more detail now, depending upon what you're running, depending upon what step you're running or what you're checking down here on the Execute tab, will depend on which tab across the top here it's actually looking at. So for example, if we look at step 1, which is our Create Calendar, you can see that we're doing Create Attendance Calendar. It'll actually tell you here that on the Schools tab, populate, blah, 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 so you do know that it's looking at the Schools tab. So when I come up here and look at the Schools tab, you can see that Debbie has filled out here that she only has one calendar type. She's got the full date range here of what the calendar is, her enter code, and her enter date. Down here, all of the schools are listed that she wants to create the calendar for, and notice she does not have a start and end date filled out or an enter date, enter code, or enter date filled out because all of her buildings use these default values up here. If you have a building that's different, then you would have to fill this information out here. So far, so good?
And if you don't use the right enter date?
She does know that she does not have the right enter date.
Okay, thank you.
Do we put in what we perceive as the enter date for next year?
Yeah, one of the things with some of the steps that we do run in New Year Rollover can be reran. And it'll do update values and whatever on the config files. But one of the things that will not update is if you create your calendar, and not so much the calendar, because the calendar, you can update that and be good with the calendar. But when you're creating your enrollment records, so when you're running your step 6s and it's creating your enrollment records and whatnot, it will not re-update this date if it's wrong. So, for example, we're going to call Debbie out on this. Last year, Debbie thought, foolishly...
It wasn't just me.
Debbie thought that she was starting school on September 1st. So they ran all their steps based on an enter date of September 1st. When she realized that it was actually September 8th that we were starting, she could not just come in, re-change this date, and then rerun those steps. It does not update that enrollment date. So if that happens and you do that, you have to actually have a script written that updates the enter date. Yeah,
I gave you guys a good example.
Thank you.
Yeah, she did that on purpose.
Karen and Kathy did it too.
Yeah, it was painful. That was a good lesson.
Hey, Barb.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Michelle from GISD. As far as those enter dates, the enter code and enter date, where that comes from that we found is in the district configuration file. When you're running the district configuration files, that's what populates school setup. The enter code and enter date actually comes from that step.
So what you're saying is when you run this step, it fills it in here?
When you run the district configuration files, when you do that step where you're selecting all the district configuration files, that's the step that actually populates school setup. If you go to school setup.
Right here.
Yeah. Yeah, because you'll notice I've done this several times when you first create the regular school extension, and if you go into one of your new schools and you look at school setup, you'll see everything's empty. We run our district configuration file step first because that's what EduPoint recommends. I asked them why, but they said they just found that they had better luck if you run that first. If you don't, sometimes they've had issues, so we always run that one first, and then we run the calendar step second. But I've tested it before, and then when you go back and after you run the district configuration file step, you'll notice, go back and look at school setup, and in school setup, it actually populates that enter code and enter date for the school.
So then when you're running...
Based on what you have on the schools tab in your district configuration file set.
So then when you run your step 6s, these step 6s right here, and using what it finds here, it's actually using then what it finds here.
Yeah. So when you run your district configuration file step, you want to make sure those dates are correct and the way that you want them on that step on the schools tab. That's what I found. You can test it out too, but I've tested it several times. I just did it again a couple weeks ago.
I believe you.
It still acts that way. Yeah. Because it threw us a couple years ago. When Kersley, we had a couple districts that called us and they had the wrong enter dates for the kids. And I was looking at the school config step, which has got the setup, and I'm thinking that's the step that populated the school setup screen. And the dates were right, but the district configuration step was the one that had the wrong date in it. So then I tested it further, and that's actually the step, which doesn't, it kind of tricks you a little because you wouldn't think that step would be populating the school setup enter code and date, but it does.
But if you ran district setup and realized before you ran your step 6s that the date was wrong, you could either rerun district setup or come in here and change this date because the step 6 looks
at that date. Exactly. Yep. But just so you know which step populates those two fields, because it is a little bit deceiving. You would think it would be the school configuration step, which has a step called setup, and you would think it says school and setup. You would think that's where it's populating it in that step, but it doesn't. It's in the district configuration step. We found that out the hard way. I tested it several times.
All right. Yep. Thank you. So everybody understands?
And then, too, just a quick little, just a kind of a tip, and just so that you know, when you're running that calendar step, if you're focused to, let's say, the high school or something when you're running it, and then you want to quickly do a verification and just make sure that your calendar's all, copied over. If you're focused to the school that you ran the step on, when you go to look at the calendar, you actually won't see the calendar in the new school year. You have to clear the cache. You'll see it for all the other schools, but not for the one that you were focused to when you ran the calendar step. So just so you know, because first time it happened to me, I thought, oh no, it didn't work, and then I realized it was because I was focused on the school.
Yeah.
That I had,
I think
and then it got it.
Catherine from Grand Rapids had said too, when we just recently talked about New Year rollover, is she said she went to the when we were at the user conference, she went to the New Year rollover session, and they actually told everybody in the session to clear cache between every step.
Yeah, we always do usually, especially now. Yeah.
I've told people to do that, and I don't know that we've ran into issues where we've had to do that, other than maybe something that you just said. So I was just wondering if you guys did that too, and if you had ever come across why you did that, or you just did it.
We did it after, I think, because we were always trained to do it after the configuration steps. So when you're running district configuration and school configuration, but never really was told to do it after the calendar step. That one we always thought was just kind of a, not a very intensive, or that you'd need to clear cache or anything. But you actually, I mean, you do, if you're verifying and you happen to be checking. The only calendar, though, that doesn't show is the one for the school that you're focused to. You'll see it for all the rest of them. But once you clear cache or log out and back in, then you see it. But just so you know, if somebody's...
Yeah, no, that's good to know.
You're verifying. Usually, yeah.
Was someone else going to ask something? Sorry, missed that. Okay. So it's looking at the calendar. If you like Michelle said, after you run this step, if you switch your focus to the new school year and look at the buildings, then you should see the calendar that was created based on these dates. What you want to do is, if you do have any changes to your calendar, where like an end of a term ended on a Friday, and you have that Monday off until the beginning of the next term doesn't start until that day, then at that point you could go through and update your calendar so that when you're doing your school config files, if you have any terms that end on a particular date, then they're using those correct dates. You can still correct them after the fact. The only thing where you want to watch is if you have a semester that's changing like that. On a Friday is the last day, Monday might be a day off, Tuesday is the first day of that semester. If you don't catch that and you go through and you start scheduling and you put your schedules out there and stuff, if you haven't changed that date and things have, which we kind of run across too, that last year, the year before we had all the snow days and things had changed, it's very similar to like your enrollment date. It won't automatically change those scheduled dates on those kids' course requests or schedules. So you just kind of want to watch your calendars if you do have any kind of end of terms that end that way. Because even on snow days, if you go in and change your calendars and whatnot, it doesn't change those start dates on the second or try or third try. Your step 2, so what Michelle's saying too is, you guys did your calendar one first, right? Or did you do district one first? Michelle, what did you guys say?
We always did district first because that's what EduPoint recommended. Lori, what's her last name, Whedon or whatever, when I worked with her a couple years ago, and I asked them why, because we used to do the calendar one first, but she said they just found that they have less issues. The developers advised her that to run the district configuration step first. So we do that one first, then we do the calendar. And then we go into the school configuration, which too, just to add a quick note, we used to separate our school config files out too, with the term code. They did introduce an ETN in 9070 to fix that issue that you were talking about, Barb, where you kind of can't tell which configuration files are going to push over first, and it could cause issues. Like if the, staff weren't pushed over before we had that with the group files for athletic eligibility and things like that, or with these term codes and that. They've since fixed that issue. I tested it a couple times, and it seems to be working. I haven't found an issue with it yet. So you can actually, if you wanted to, run all of them, except for, of course, section. You always want to do that separately, because like you mentioned, it's, your elementaries are going to be the only ones that you're probably, or alt-ed to move sections for. But the rest of those, you can actually do them all in one step according to that ETN. So that's pretty new.
Okay. So what Michelle's saying is that you could kind of swap these around where you've got your config files, right, for district. That could be your first step. And then your school calendar stuff is next, and then your school config files, right? And then you wouldn't need to pull out the term setup separately. Is that how you guys did school setup last year, or you're just testing it this year?
This year, it was just introduced in 9070, which was, I think, over the summer. So it's brand new. Yeah, it came in after, and we just happened to notice that in our list of ETNs. So I was checking it out to see, and it does appear to be working, because we had to break out quite a few different steps in school configuration because of the way it was pushing over. And then the attendance letters and the merge files, because it was pushing the attendance letter setup pieces over before the merge documents, and that was causing issues. But all of that seems to have been resolved with that ETN. Also, just to let you know real quick, sorry, I feel like I keep interrupting, but Tony came in and
that's the whole point. I appreciate it. Keep going.
If people want to try to connect again to the WebEx that couldn't before because we were at that limit, go ahead and try again, and I'll have to do a little process where I allow you to connect. I'll see an alert here, but if you want to try to reconnect for those that weren't able to, go ahead and do that.
Okay. This is James from Schoolcraft. I've got another question. In the New Year setup, each of the steps has a schools tab, and then that tab has dates. Do we need to go through and manually change all the dates on all the setup steps?
Well, the reason that if you had the schools on there with the dates, when we first set it up, one of the options that you can do is duplicate your New Year rollover. So if you duplicate your rollover and you're bringing over the schools tab, that's where those dates come from. Your dates, as Michelle was saying, those are going to come over when you're creating your calendar and your district school setup from this enrollment default. So really those two would be the ones that were most important to make sure the dates were correct.
So then if the dates are incorrect on the other steps, it's not referring to those dates when it's doing its process?
Right. Because the assign next year, school and grade, doesn't really look at anything with dates. And your step 6s, when it's creating those enrollment records, it's pulling from the rollover defaults in school setup.
We just make sure those dates are accurate for steps 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Those would be the most important.
All right, thank you.
I have come across, and I don't know who it was, we were someplace once, or was helping someone, or someone tried it, and they forgot to come in. I think it might have been the calendars. It did actually give an error message about the dates. It knew that the dates that you were trying to use were not a part of the year that you were trying to set that step up for. I don't remember exactly what step it was, but I do remember at some point getting an error on the dates. So it was referencing to kind of double check your dates. So if we keep going with the way the steps were here, then the school term setup will go through and process the configuration files for the school term setup. So the school term setup, if you keep it the way that folks have it now, it's looking at the process configuration files, which is then coming over to big files tab right here, and it's going to look at which configuration file that you want to copy over. In this case, we're doing the school term setup, so that's the only one that's checked. When you do look at this screen, it's sorted first by the type, so all your district ones are at the top. Then you've got your bottom and one specific here.
Could you add those
They're alphabetical within those types.
Report 504 in special ed? Can you? Will it take you a minute?
If you're having conversations in the sidebar, mute your phone.
I put it in your email.
Debbie.
I think some people need to be muted.
Debbie. Okay.
Yeah, and then the 504
okay.
is under
The school term setup, that's also going to come here and look to see what schools you're running that for, so that it knows which school term setup to copy over.
You're going to add on the 2 fields in that report. So I'll check on that later, and hopefully then I can run that report. Thank you.
You switch it, your config files go first here. If you're, whichever way, if you keep it the way you got it, or like Michelle was saying, that they do it there, then when you're running your config files, again, this is looking at the configuration files tab, and it does kind of point out to you here, look at your configuration files tab. So then it's going to come over here to the configuration files, and it's going to look to see which of these files that you want to copy over. Is there not something in the manual that talks about all of these, or am I thinking of something that was passed out at the user conference? Anybody?
What do you mean? For the...
Is there something, wasn't there a list somewhere, was it something that was passed out at the user conference, or in the manual that talks about each of these configuration files?
I didn't go to the session at the users conference. I didn't look at that session for this. But I think there might be some things that talk about those. Are you on you're on the district configuration file step? One thing to add on that, there are some new fields in that I noticed. So you'll want to pay attention to that. They added some new fields to the district config files. There's like 5 new ones, I think. So you want to make sure, like ones that are for fee, and there's
there was an attendance one too, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think there's a new one for that. Yeah, there's a few. I started documenting it, but I don't have all my documentation done for that yet for our districts. But yeah, there are some new ones in there. Yeah, there's I think that's school year attendance ABS threshold is new. And then there's some in regards to fees that are new. So you'll just want to review those district configuration files, because you'll probably see some that you don't have checked. And depending on if you're using that piece of the system, you'll want to make sure that you include those as well.
Right.
Now, will it hurt to have them checked if you're not using it?
No. So that's what we would say, you know, if you're not sure, just check it, because if you don't have it, it's just not going to move anything over. So.
Right.
Barb, this is Mary from my case. In the Synergy New Year Rollover Process Guide, it does walk you through all of these steps. It looks like there's some really good information in there for those that want to read it.
Yep. Does that have a list of these configuration files in the appendix?
That part I didn't see, but it goes through every step.
Okay.
Like the New Year checklist, those are all links on the New Year rollover checklist. So if you just click one of the links, it takes you to that step and then kind of discusses what that step does.
I think now, thinking about it, I think I saw on the FTP site that there is a configuration files listing on the FTP site in the NYR folder, the New Year folder.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I remember seeing that.
Yep, I think that's where it talks about all these. But I don't know how old it is. So like the new ones that Michelle was talking about, I don't know if those are on there yet. So just that might. Yep. One thing to keep in mind too, which I've noticed in talking about updated stuff, it might have even been New Year rollover. I found that if I looked at a 9.0 manual, it wasn't in there, but if you looked at a 10.0 manual, the new stuff was in there, and it was stuff that was adding in one of the 9 releases. So you can at least kind of get the information in the 10.0 manual. It's a different interface, but it at least explains some of those new fields in there. So just a little FYI. When you're running these specific steps, like I said, it's looking at the specific tabs. So from the config files, it's looking at that config files tab. If you then run over and do your school setup, again, it's going to look very similar in that we're looking at this configuration files, but now instead of checking or working with the district ones, you're going to go through and select the school ones that you had. One of the things is, like we said, if you don't have something set up in there, you might get a message, kind of a warning message telling you that there's no grid codes, for example, set up or something like that. So it might give you a warning that it didn't find anything to copy over, but it's just a warning. The step is typically still successful. They did remove some stuff off the list too, so I know that they were talking about, I heard someone say something about that before the graduation requirements used to be one, I think from a school's perspective that was checked. They don't have those, so when they added some, they also took some away, so keep that in mind. If you had some specific notes on some of the configuration files that you don't see anymore, it could be because they don't have, they took them away. If you do see any that have like a state identifier on the end, obviously this is something specific to Washington, so you would not have to check that even though it's listed as a district one. There's also going to be some ones that have to do specifically with special ed, so if you don't have special ed, you're not going to need those. And then you'll see then, again, there's also some other ones for Oregon State reporting. Right now, we do not have anything specific to Michigan State reporting as far as this New Year rollover config file stuff that you have to worry about. Okay? Kind of like we talked about before about school section, if you don't want to copy over the master schedule, then don't include that in your config files. So again, if we look at like our 4A config file trees, here's where I could say, yes, for just this elementary, I want to bring over the school section file. Then on the schools tab, you could pick which schools you were actually copying that over for. If you have an elementary that wants to start from scratch, then just don't include them on here, and they can kind of start out with a clean slate. You do not have to run this step for your secondaries, because if they're using the schedule control or the option set, they'll have the option within there to say, hey, I want to bring over last year's master schedule, so bring it into my option set. You don't have to use the New Year rollover piece for this. One of the things that we did find, and I haven't looked at, maybe you guys at GIC ran into this or remember seeing the ETN, is we ran into a few districts last year where this particular step, the New Year rollover step of copying over the elementary master schedules, wasn't bringing them over. So even for the elementaries, I think that was you, Mary, at my case, right? Even for the elementaries, we had to bring it into an option set and then just copy it right into the SIS sections. Did you guys run into that at all at GIC, Michelle?
No, we didn't have that last year. I think the year before we had a few issues, but last year, no, not to my knowledge. I just checked with Laura too. She said no, we're not aware of any issues.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that this year, Mary, and make sure they copy over, okay?
Yeah. And for my case districts that are out there listening, please make sure you go through each and every tab. I know last year on the schools tab, they didn't have all their schools listed. So when the rollover happened, like our non-public school buildings weren't included, so the kids didn't get rolled. I mean, it was kind of a mess there for a while. So I just want to reiterate that you please check each and every tab. Thank you.
Right. If you did anything like subsequent steps where you might have ran something for just an individual building, so you're kind of playing with what schools you had listed in the various steps, make sure you've gone back in and kind of, looked at those and make sure you didn't remove a building for whatever reason, you don't want to run it again, that you've added it back in. We won't typically at our end mess with your original steps, I don't know if you noticed, but I'll create, on some systems we'll have a 99 CMT step. So if I need to try something for an individual building, for an individual kid, I won't change any of these existing steps up here. I'll just use this step. So if you need to do something like that, you're more than welcome to create another step to run what you need to run specifically. That way you don't forget to go to one of these originals and, like Mary said, then have removed a school or done something with it and it won't run. We came across that a lot last year with some of the districts where they're saying we're running our step 6s, we're trying to roll our kids over, and it's only bringing over 5 kids. What's going on? Well, they had gone through and on the student filter had been playing with it at the end of the year, just running it for a few kids and forgot to take those kids off. So that happened on more than one occasion. So like Mary said, go through this for your steps on that initial, I'm getting ready to run this, and make sure these tabs look the way they need to look for if you're running your school config or you're running set next year grade for all your buildings and those types of things. On the assign next year grade in school, all you're doing here is when you look at a student's record and you look at the other info tab, you have next grade and next school here. You're setting where that kid is going to go next year. When you look at back at your district setup, it should be set up because if you're first time running it, you want to double check it. If you look in district setup at your grade setup, you've kind of set that progression of where they're going for the next year. So 1 goes to 2, so on and so forth, on down. No, remember, our 12th graders don't go anywhere. They just stay in that year as a graduate, so we don't have to put anything in here where they're going. So if they're staying within the same school, it's going to bump them up to the next grade in here, from here. When you're doing the assign next year grade in school, notice there's nothing up here in the new year rollover box, but if you scroll down here, we've got stuff down here at the bottom of your current year math assignment. So here's where you're telling it, assign students to the next grade level in school. You do have an override existing option. So if it's a student that's matching your criteria, i.e. at a building and grade level you've picked, it'll override anything that's already in the field and repopulate it. If you want to watch this because if you've started to do retentions or any manual overrides, those types of things, if you're doing that group of kids again and they meet your criteria and you do override existing, you're going to override any of the manual work people have done with putting them back in whatever the default kind of move is.
Yeah. And also, once you've run this, if you try to inactivate a student, you're going to have to go into the new year, take them out of there before you can inactivate them. Because we had that quite a bit last year. Oh, this was Mary from my case, sorry.
Can you repeat that, Mary?
That after you have run your new year rollovers and you're working in the, you have your new year set up, if you try to inactivate a current student, it's going to throw an error because it's looking that they've already been assigned to a new building or a new year. So you have to go into that new year, remove them out of there before you can then inactivate them.
Isn't there a drop down or something that says what do you want to do with next year? I thought that's what
did everybody experience that?
No.
We haven't.
It might be an error that because last year and prior years this is Karen at Tri-County, I have had where we'll receive an error because that student in particular is tied to a student group or a locker.
Right,
That
locker,
happens. You have to go to the new year and remove that link. So you'd have to go into the new year and go to the student group and remove it, or go to the locker and remove that. But then you can go back to the current year and do an inactivate and use that step in the inactivation process that says remove from next year, whatever it says. And then you should be fine. I think that's the only error I have ever gotten.
Yeah, that's the only time you're right that usually happens is if they're tied to a group or a locker that you can inactivate them. You're correct.
Right. Because doesn't this process, if they're in a group now, it just rolls them right over, I believe, into that same group?
Yeah, the step 6 if you select student group.
Yep.
Do you recall seeing an ETN, Michelle, since you've been working on rollover, that says that they've done anything different with the student groups for that issue?
I I have not seen that so far, unless it's in a separate one. It's not in a New Year rollover ETN, but maybe I'll have to look and see if there's anything on student groups. But I haven't currently seen that.
The design.
So Barb, would you maybe not roll the groups over until towards the end to rerun it?
Yeah, I think you have to. I don't think you can. That's not something that you can go back in and run that step 6 to bring those over.
Okay. So you have to do it to begin with.
Right. Because we've had where folks have not done lockers, for example, and then Belinda has to do something to copy the lockers over for them because you can't redo that step. It doesn't just fill them in after the fact.
Gotcha.
The only thing you could do is go in the new school year. I mean, our districts have done just taking the student out of that group or that locker, and then you're able to inactivate them. But which isn't ideal, but it's really the only way currently to fix that.
Jennifer said that she recalls kind of reporting that last year, and EduPoint said that was kind of the way it worked. They didn't see that as an issue.
Yeah, if I had to say, you would have to exit them out of the group and give them an exit date in the new year.
No, I actually removed them from the group because if you're inactivating them in the current year, they're not even going to be in the group to begin with.
Right.
I hard delete them from the group in the next year.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the student won't be in that building next year, or that.
Right.
Okay. As far as the next year's school search order, same school, meaning if it's a K-5 building, K is going to first going to second, third going to fourth, that's considered to be within the same school. So it just keeps them in that same building. If you do the school override, meaning, okay, this building goes K through 5, and so in school setup it knows 5th grade is the last grade of that building. So where does that 5th grader have to go after they leave that building? So the school override then looks over here at your schools file, or your schools tab, and it looks to see here what the school override is. So if Gladiola, I don't know what grade it goes to, but let's say Gladiola goes to 5th grade. So when it looks at a 5th grader, it knows there's no 6th grade for that kid to stay within the same school. So then it looks over here at the Wyoming Intermediate, and it knows that then these 5th graders go to 6th grade over at Wyoming Intermediate. And then our 9th graders from Wyoming Intermediate will promote to the high school, or I'm sorry, junior high will promote to the high school. So that's what this here is doing in regards to the school override. You also have that you can do same school grid, so that the school, if you do anything with address grids or things like that, that you can, instead of using the school override, the K through 4th graders will stay in the same building, but then the 5th grade, based on which middle school or high school they go to, it'll look at their address grid and know then that progression of the schools that it goes through. And some of you use school grid. I know, Michelle, you guys have some folks that use school grid, but most of you are small enough, you only have the one kind of line of options.
Flint uses, same school and grid. There are issues if your grid codes change, like if your boundaries change.
Yeah.
And that's something I reported to EduPoint because I said they need to have another option there because of the student is currently at a building that offers the same grade level they're in, but actually they changed their grid codes and they're supposed to be at a different elementary building. Because the building they're currently in offers that grade, it keeps them there, even though the grid code says they should be at a different elementary. So I've mentioned that a few times. They need, and I've heard of several other districts that have thought that's an issue too. If your boundaries change, which a lot of times they do. I mean, in a school like Flint, they're changing them every year right now because of funding and having to close schools. So
they could use like a grid only.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I've asked them. I've made that suggestion, but I don't think they've done it yet. So I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that use the grid, but.
Okay, so that's kind of setting that next year grade stuff, and then I usually tell folks too is after you've run this, go into students and, double check and make sure things look good. So, say that you want to use current grade and then come down to next year grade in school and, do a find and make sure you see that, in this case, your 12th graders are staying and your 10th's moving up and 7th's going to, make sure these look good, that you see that the progression has kind of taken place. Mm-hmm. When you run your step 6s, it moves the kids based on what it's finding in these fields. So if you ran it and nothing happened here and you try to run that step 6, you're never going to see any kids over in the new year. So you want to double check and make sure that things are looking good and that they moved over. Then when you run any of your step 6s, you can see here now that we've got our options up here in our New Year rollover piece, or box I should say. We are looking at some configuration files, which we'll talk about here in a second, and then we're processing students. So what do you want to happen with those students? So the allow deletion of out-of-sync students, delete enrollment. So this is kind of that step that's going to make sure kind of what you got going on in your new year is matching, or your new year is kind of matching what you got going on in your current year. So based on where kids are supposed to go next year, if they added a new student and said do nothing with that student, or they dropped a student and said do nothing with that student in the new year, it's going to kind of go through and make sure that the 2 years are in sync with each other based on the information. Now, I have always had folks have both of these checked, and we, not that I know of, have ran into any major issues, but I recently heard EduPoint say that you shouldn't keep these 2 checks until the very end. Michelle, what do you guys do? Do you guys have these checked typically, or is it something that you only do?
No.
Go ahead.
No, we sure don't. Yeah, I agree with them on that one. We ran into a couple things, and it's just things that you have to keep in mind of how that works, those 2 check boxes. And we have a little kind of short tip sheet that we hand out to our users that kind of describes that a little bit for them, because it can kind of be difficult to describe. But I can give you a couple examples of what we ran into you just want to be aware of. With the allow the deletion of out-of-sync students in the new year checkbox, first off, a good example of what we ran into is 1 year Flushing had that checked.
Yeah.
And when they ran, so they went through and he was running that step for just the, I think he was doing just the high school. That particular step had to do with the high school kids or something. He was just moving those kids over. And all of a sudden he gets a call, and the elementary secretary said, we just lost like all the kids that we had enrolled in our elementary building in the new school year. Well, what happened was they had some of the kids in the early childhood program that the elementary teacher or elementary secretary had went and enrolled, like, I don't know, 50 kids, 100 kids, whatever. She spent a couple hours just selecting those students that were going to be in the new school year in kindergarten for Flushing. Not all, the early childhood programs, they don't all go to Flushing. They get kids from all over, but some of those kids will move over. So they don't have a next grade and next school assigned to them on the other tab because they're not sure who's going to be staying and who's going to be going somewhere else. So what happens when you run that step and you say allow deletion of out-of-sync students, even though he was only processing the high school kids, it looks at the whole district at that point once you check that box, because it's looking for out-of-sync students. So it's got to look through kids that maybe were in the middle school that should be in the high school, or vice versa, or however. So it starts looking through, and the first thing it does is it looks for anybody that doesn't have a next grade or next school, and it takes them out of the new school year, is one of the things it does. So because these kindergartners didn't have a next grade, next school when they were in the preschool program, it took them out of the new school year. So all the work the secretary did for a couple hours getting those kids manually in there was wiped out by doing that. So you just want to keep that in mind. So maybe changing, and so we told them their process for the next school year is what they actually would do is the kids they wanted to be in the new school year that were in early childhood, they gave them a next grade, next school of kindergarten and whatever school they were going to, and then that way they could move them over that way, or even if they manually put them in, they weren't going to wipe out when they ran this allow sync.
Let me ask you this. So in that example there, though, you were one of the pre-K kids, but I wasn't. When she put both of us in manually, only you went away, but because I didn't have anything existing in the current year, I stayed there. Or did it blow the other kids from coming out?
What it looked at is the student that was a preschool student in the current school year, they did not have a next grade or next school defined on the other tab. Because they don't give those kids a next grade and next school, the preschool kids, because they're not all Flushing students. They'll get kids in those programs, they can be coming from all over. So not all of them are going to go from preschool in Flushing to a Flushing elementary and kindergarten. Not all of them are going to. So they don't typically assign them a next grade, next school. So what they usually do is the secretary will go through and she'll just manually put them into the elementary that they're going to be in for the next school year. That's how their process was. So not knowing when they ran this allow deletion of out-of-sync students that it actually looks, and if a kid doesn't have a next grade, next school, it actually takes them out of the new school year. So these preschool kids that didn't have a next grade, next school on the other tab that were enrolled manually into the new school year, it wiped them out of the new school year. It took them right out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
it's just something that we came across.
Right. So then what go ahead.
So just know when you run this step that it will take any student out of the new school year that does not have a next grade, next school in the current school year on the other tab. You just need to know that piece. So depending on your process, like I said, they kind of, I think, altered their process a little bit then and made sure that those preschool kids had a next grade of kindergarten and next school of whatever elementary they were going to be in the current school year. And I think they probably just moved them that way too, rather than manually putting them in. Just a lesson learned, and maybe not everybody does it that way, but that's what tripped them up. That piece, and then also Mark was like, I wasn't even focused to the elementary. I was focused to the high school. I was processing the high school kids at the time. Not focused, but processing the high school building only on that step. It was just his high school step. But when you're running that out of deletion of out-of-sync students, it doesn't matter what school you have selected on the schools tab. It's going to actually go through and the whole district and move them around and adjust them.
And if you hold this off and do it at the end of the year or closer over, but you have people that are they're inactivating kids in the current year and they're not filling in to inactivate or no-show them in the new year, the only way to get them out then is to run this step with those boxes checked.
And that's fine. I mean, just like I say, just needing to understand how that works. So that box is checked. Two important things. It doesn't matter which school you have selected on the schools tab. It's going to adjust anybody out of sync in the new school year. It goes across all schools, because that was something that EduPoint told me too when we were going through all this. And make sure that any student that's in the new school year that's also in the current school year has a next grade, next school selected. Now, whether they're inactive in the current school year, I'm not sure if that, we didn't run into that. But
hey, Barb.
Yep.
So how often do you see districts rerunning these 6 steps? Because let's say we're doing our New Year rollover next year, and I think our process, Deb, correct me if I'm wrong, is we set it up the way we want it to go right now, and things start to process, so all the students are rolled over. But towards the end of the year, once we really know who is a retainee or who's going to be moving to a different building, they can adjust those. You can rerun these steps, and it fixes those.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so these 6 steps you can run fairly safely throughout the end of your school year.
Yep.
Right.
Multiple times.
I run mine quite a bit because we change our next year information.
Right.
pretty regularly throughout the last quarter of the year, and then they're working on scheduling, and they want the kids out of the buildings that are, you know, or they're changing grade levels or whatever.
Right, and that just kind of goes along, you know, with what Michelle was saying is, and what Debbie then says is, to fix the enrollment records in the new year, Debbie has her people fix the next year grade in school. So if you keep those next year grade schools up to date, then you're okay with it, you know, cleaning things up in the new year based on that next year grade in school. Whereas, like what Michelle's saying is, if Debbie's folks went into the new year and manually made their changes and didn't fix that next year grade in school, that's where she's going to run into a problem.
Right.
So maybe
you got to know your process.
Right. So you want it, so like what Debbie's saying, she can run it the multiple times because her folks are updating the next year grade in school in the current year. And that's true. If they enroll a new student and forget to tell it what they want the action to be, like what Debbie's saying, there's not going to be an enrollment record in the new year for them to give them scheduling. So let's say they go into the new year, manually add that kid in, never filling in next year grade in school. If you rerun this process, then it's going to wipe out their record in the new year as well as their scheduling stuff, and they'd have to redo it. So it kind of sounds like your safest bet is going to be to just make sure your next year grade in school is always what you want it to be and base that new year rollover off that. Make sense?
Yep. Hey, Barb.
Yep.
Just to add to, for the delete enrollments in the new year that are inactive in the current year checkbox, one other thing just to know about that one, and again, that's why we warn our districts just to be careful when using those checkboxes. Not that you can't use them, but just understanding the different scenarios and how they work. With that particular checkbox we found, if you just want to be careful, if a student was inactivated in the current year and then removed from the next school year, but they decided to return like a few months later and were enrolled back into the new school year because maybe they changed their mind, they were going to move or something. So they were inactivated in the current school year. They were put back into the new school year because they decided to come back. If you run this step and check that box, they would be removed from the new school year. So just depending on when you do certain steps, just kind of be careful that this could happen. I mean, it's not something that happens all the time, but it's just something to keep in mind for that checkbox as well. Does that make sense? Because once in a while that will happen. A student will be inactivated in the current school year thinking they're going to move, and then they end up coming back. And so they go ahead and enroll them in the new school year. But when you run the step here with that checkbox, delete it, or to delete enrollments in the new school year when they're inactive in the current year, if you're still, if you haven't flipped over to your current year being the new year yet and you're running that step, it's going to take them out.
So the kid didn't come back in the current year. He just said, I'm moving back over the summer. So they just put him in the new year. Yeah. Yeah, they had activated on this. Happened in a couple of our districts before. Not a lot. I mean, I don't think it happens a ton, but it has happened. It's just one of those things that we make sure we keep note of. So when they call and say, you know, this kid, I had them enrolled in the new school year and they were wiped out, well, we found out they ran that step and they were inactive in the current year, but then they ended up, because they thought that they were moving and they ended up coming back. And so when the step was ran with that checkbox, it took them out. So it doesn't happen a lot. Just something to keep aware of. Yep. The matriculation process here says only rollover students have a next year grade in school. The other option is determine it, so it would kind of just do it on its own. The default is only those that have something in there, because there might be kids where you know they're not coming back, but you're not inactivating them in the current year. They're going to finish the school year, so you want to blank out the next year grade in school so there's not something over there in the new year. You don't want the system to just assume all the blanks get moved over. And EduPoint actually recommends that you only do the rollover for those kids that have the next year grade in school in there. On some of these areas, like in this place here, it does give you a little explanation if you pull down the help there on those fields. On the other one here is the student filter type. You can either base it off whatever their current year grade in school is or their next year grade in school. Next year grade in school is the default. It says it in here but doesn't put the around here. This is typically the one that's recommended. This is going to base their enrollment record in the new year off of what it finds in the next year grade in school. So, which makes sense because that's going to be next year. So you want to put them in the new school year in whatever building or grade level that you want them to be in this case, the 16-17 school year. Okay? And then on these step 6s, because we have the process configuration files checked, then we want to double check the configuration files, and we do have a couple configuration files here that are type student, meaning it's going to work in the student rollover, and in Debbie's case here, she's copying over student groups, but there is also student lockers as well. So if they enter a building and they're in the same locker all 4 years of the high school, you can copy this over from year to year as well. These right here are New Year rollover process for special ed stuff. So unless you have Synergy special ed, you don't need to worry about those. So you can do that as well here. That's looking here. The other thing that will come over during the rollover on these enrollment properties and student properties, these do take a, what does that mean? During annotation, I'll tell you. Sorry, a little pop-up came up on for the WebEx.
Well, that's weird. I don't see it over here.
That's okay. It's fine.
Can you still see it? Okay. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. These are a variety. You can see these are a variety of enrollment properties, all different different user kind of fields or demographic fields. This gives you the opportunity to take those fields from the current year, and when it creates the record for them in the new year, to keep the existing values. So this is entirely up to you. Same school, remember our kindergarten through 4th grade that we talked about are staying in the same building. Do you want it to stay there? Or different school, so when they're moving from the elementary to the middle school, do you want it to keep the existing value, clear the value, so on and so forth. If you have certain permissions at a building that stay the same the whole time they're at that building, you can keep the existing value, but maybe when they promote out into a different building, you want it to clear the value because they have to redo those permissions. You could do that as well. One of the things that we do recommend that you clear is, if you scroll down, these are alphabetical, by the way. There's next year grade in school, next year TEDed, next year school GU. That's basically that next year information field that we saw, and we do recommend that you clear those. If you don't clear them, then when a 3rd grader promotes to 4th grade and you're looking at them in the new year as a 4th grader, their next year information is already going to be filled out, and it's going to look like they're going to 4th grade again. So in the new year, there's no reason to keep those values, so you can clear those out so that each year those are starting out fresh. It's entirely up to you on these other fields what you want to do with them during the roll process. Michelle, do you guys have anybody that does much with clearing out values or setting values?
Yeah, we have some state fields in that we use, that we make sure that they have either cleared or kept. One thing just to note on that next grade in school also that is important, I had learned from EduPoint, we had an issue with that before, it really is important that you clear those out. Because some people think, well, if I go ahead and, reassign them, you have that option, that checkbox that says to overwrite existing. And even though you have that ability to overwrite existing, if you've got students that are 12th graders, it's not going to remove ones that shouldn't have a next grade in school. Yep. So then your 12th graders would accidentally be moved over, because some people have been tripped up by that, thinking that, oh, well, I didn't clear them, I forgot to clear them in that step, but I can just override and I'll be okay. But you can't overwrite. You can overwrite the existing ones, but your 12th graders won't, their 11 to 12 won't be removed, and then you're going to accidentally move those 12th graders over into the new school year. So it
only overrides for kids that meet your criteria. And so when we're running the next year grade in school, we don't do anything with current 12th graders, so therefore it would not clear those, like Michelle's saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so you do want to make sure you just clear those. And again, like I said, they're, oops, I gotta go to the next step.
And another one too, let's see. Oh yeah, sorry, viewer, didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, what?
There's another one too, I'm trying to remember what it is. There's a parent view one, a PXP one, the override, I don't have the sheet in front of me, so these locked in and validated fields, if you use those at all, if you use that for your high schools, you want to make sure that those get cleared out because they will carry over and you'll have some issues. If you happen to use parent view or student view for students to make course requests, that's where that's tied in. And because we ran into that too for Grand Blanc.
This stuff right here.
So, yeah, yep. And that's tied to some of the high schools will allow their students to do course requests over parent view or student view. And if you don't clear that out and those, if they've been validated and locked from the prior year, those values will push over and you'll have issues. So that's another one, but I think that's about all that we really.
Barb, there's a list of the state fields too in the state administrator guide of New Year rollover ones that should get cleared out. Some of those state fields like exclude from Section 25 and October General Ed, FTE, some of those. It's a listing of all of the state ones. I don't know if Kathy Breidinger, if you've updated that at all, or.
Kathy left.
Oh, she did. Okay.
We have a list of our own like that too, where we've got those identified as well.
So, check the state manual. We'll double check with Kathy and make sure that list is up to date.
What was the question? Oh, she heard.
Oh, she heard. She's coming.
What was the question?
Did you? They heard you say that from the New Year. You had some fields for New Year rollover for state fields that had to be cleared or not.
Oh yeah, they're in the manual. I don't know what they are off the top.
I know, but is that the question was? Is that up to date?
It is.
There you go.
Well, since we get the manual out, it is.
I was just going to ask where to find that manual.
Jen and I will work on it. Oh, sorry, and try to get it out in the next few weeks, so that you have it.
Awesome.
I don't think it's changed much. If you had a previous manual, I don't know who's asking the question.
Pat from Kentwood.
Did you ever get a manual ever?
No.
Really? Do you have access to the FTP site?
Yeah, it's out there.
I don't know how old
Is it out there? Okay. No, I don't, and I haven't looked at it. Pam.
EduPoint's FTP site.
FTP.
FTP. I don't know how old that one is, but I can give you the current one that we have available, but just know that we are in the middle of updating it too.
That would be
this
helpful.
This is Mary from my case. I'm looking at the 2012, I think, of the copyright, but it's Chapter 5, New Year Rollover, in the Admin State Reporting Guide.
We can see which one we have as the latest and just put it on Basecamp as a follow-up. And then just with the caveat that
would be good. Yeah, she has a nice little grid here. It tells you clear value or keep value.
Yep, just like it shows on the screen.
Okay. And one thing to point out too, which we always get the question, when you have a step up and you're clicking execute New Year rollover, you are only running that step. So it's not like you can go to step 1 and click execute, it sweeps through. It doesn't do that. You have to execute on each step and then move on to the next step. You will get, obviously it's going to come up and it's going to, give a job interface or that it's running. You're going to see it kind of go through running, and then it's when it's finished, it will produce for you a log, so you can look at a log. Every time you do run a step, or anybody runs a step, it does put it on the history tab. This is not user-specific, meaning I'm signed on as CMT, and I can look at when Debbie ran those and review her logs. So it does generate that as well. And then each of these steps, depending upon what you're running them for, what school you're wanting to enroll, other than Michelle's thing about it doing the out-of-sync stuff regardless of what school you have picked, it will then run through and run for each of these buildings, or however you've got it set up on your 6 steps. The step 7-1 is one that we said, remember, doesn't get executed. It's just used on that district's, it's a step that's entered onto district setup, so that when you're adding or dropping kids and you're picking a next year action, it's looking out to that step to see what it's supposed to do with that kid, basically. Oh, I didn't talk about students.
Yeah, I don't have a 7.
If you don't have a 7, that you're just, well, you don't really, do you roll, Margaret?
Yeah.
Or do you just bring in all the kids each year, don't you?
Nope, we roll. No, we have, yes, we roll. Multiple focuses, yep. We roll ed tech, and we bring over new. We roll special ed, we roll adult,
Right, but you're not like a typical, like,
no.
You're not typical in that if I'm enrolling a new kid in April, I want to get that kid into my scheduling process for the following year.
No.
So, I mean, so
that's
you're not
what
like
this is for? Okay.
Yeah, you're not a typical, I need to get the kids in
typical.
you don't do scheduling in there or anything like that.
Yeah, we're not typical, no. Okay, so that's what that is. Okay.
Yeah. We talked about the enrollment properties, but then we kind of got sidetracked. The enrollment properties, if you look down at the bottom, you do have some user-defined enrollment properties. So these are going to be things that are, specific to the enrollment record that are user-defined fields. On your student properties, you as well have some that you can add here. These are going to be student demographic type things if you want to clear them. By default, these are going to, these all come over. But if you wanted to do something different with them as far as clearing them or setting a specific value, and then if you have any user-defined fields that you want to do something different with as far as clearing or setting a different value. So you can copy these over as well if you want to do, or they copy over if you want to do something different with them as far as setting a value or clearing them.
Okay, so they will definitely, even if they're not listed, they will copy over and keep the existing value.
On the these student fields?
On the user-defined.
Yes. On
okay.
the student property ones on the user-defined.
Okay.
I was going to say something else. If you look at, like, the other thing, too, I don't think I have it here, but if you are working with a kid that's coming up on an error log and you want to just work with that kid and see what's going on with that kid so you don't have to dig through the entire error log, you can, on the student filter, just pick a specific kid to run the rollover for, and then when you go through and process your student here, if you're running, let me make sure it's rollover, if you're processing your students, then when it goes through and tries to create that record for that student in the new year, it's only going to look to the student filter and run it for that one student. So here's where I had some schools last year that had on their step 6s, had kind of been doing that, playing with this particular kid, and then forgot to get rid of that, and if they're trying to run that step, it was only doing it for that one kid. But you can just pick a kid here and run it. That way, when you're looking at the history log, you don't have as much to look through. You can look through for just that one kid. So, anything else?
What about the assign year-end status and all that underneath there? What's that?
Does anybody still use this one here, or do you just use the set graduation status to do that now? I think most people have moved to using set year-end status with this one.
Okay. Okay, so they use the other one instead.
I think that this was like kind of the old way, and then they did the year-end status update, and I think everybody just uses that.
Okay.
I don't know of anybody that uses this. Has anybody used this here, or are you guys just using year-end status update?
I guess they just use year-end status update.
That's what we use. Yeah, we don't use it here in New Year Rollover.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Anything else, Michelle, that you guys got to add? You have a lot of districts doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're good. I think it's covered pretty much everything. Yeah. I think that's about it. Just making sure, yeah, we always advise them, just make sure that on that schools tab those dates are right on every step, because it's, you know, we've ran into certain steps we didn't realize we're looking to those dates. It's best to make sure that you have all your dates correct and changed on those steps.
So one of the things that I had kind of said in the emails too is, what's everybody's thoughts on the scheduling sessions? Did you get numbers? Do we have a lot of people? Do we need one on each side of the state?
Barb, this is Angie. I have 9 coming that want to come to Clarkston.
This is Mary at my case, and I don't think I've heard from any districts how many are coming or anything yet.
Wyoming has 2.
Lansing is looking to send at least 2, possibly 5.
2 for Galesburg.
GISD, will you guys have your individual, like, will you open up to your individual districts to come?
I'm sorry, Barbara, are you talking to me? For
Yeah.
GISD? We for scheduling?
Yeah.
We run our own sessions. Kim and I do those.
Okay, so you'll have your own there.
Yep. And then we
Barb,
usually separate it out, mass scheduling and MSB. So.
Barb, just to let you know, Kentwood is expecting about 3 or 4 to be able to come.
Okay. So, I mean, Lansing, do you have a preference which side of the state that you go to? You don't really care? You're in the middle.
I don't think so. What were the 2 choices again?
Right now, if we had 2 on each side, one would be Clarkston and one would be Kalamazoo.
I don't think there is any particular choice.
Okay. Mary, can you find out what kind of interest you would have from your districts?
Yep, I'll have to post something to base camp.
Okay. I mean, if you get quite a few on your side, we might be able to have. We would probably have enough to have 2.
Yep. Because this is in February, correct?
Yes, I believe they were like the 1st and 2nd week.
The 3rd.
Yep.
Yep, February 3rd.
But you did shorten or lessen your room space, remember?
I haven't yet. I've got everything blocked.
Okay, because remember we said if we did, it was looking like we're going to have 2, you probably wouldn't need to have that big a space.
Right. But I want to, space is so valuable around here. I'm keeping it booked until I know for sure.
Okay. All right. We'll double check and see what kind of count you have.
Okay.
And is anybody from Clarkston on the call today? Okay. Because I know they'll probably have at least 4 or 5 themselves, so that would be, I think we could probably fill up 2 spots. So just double check, Mary, and make sure, and then we'll kind of make a decision and go from there.
Okay.
Barb, I have a question about the training. Is there going to be maybe two different portions to it, just the regular scheduling from the control side, or I can't remember what it's called now, but as well as a master schedule builder? Because for Tri-County, we have our 2 individuals who do scheduling, but they don't get at all into the master schedule builder. And so I don't know if it's going to be like a half a day. The first part of the day is going to be the generic scheduling portion, and then the second half would be master schedule builder, and those individuals that don't use that might be able to leave.
Yeah, when you talk about creating your option set and getting rolling with the setup pieces and course requests and those types of things, that's really the same across the board. So they could, everybody can participate in that. And then eventually even your MSB folks will create an option set with just mass scheduling in it to use the class board and potentially run within the mass scheduling set. So we could kind of follow that route and go across all that, and then when we got into things that were specific to just MSB, then your mass scheduling folks could leave.
Gotcha.
But, the first part of it, we can have kind of everybody be together.
And then Barb, is someone from CMT going to be here and at Clarkston?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you say a date yet, Mary, for KRISA?
Those are actually
February
on the
3rd. February 3rd, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else? Anything? Okay.
Well, this was great, Barb. Thank you.
Excellent. Very helpful.
Do I?
Yes, very, very helpful.